So when President Biden announced his new budget the other day, he took some questions at the end of the press conference, and I believe there were 6 or 7 questions. 6 of the questions were about his recent comments about Putin and Russia, and one of them was about the budget. And I mean, you can go watch it yourself, but it sounded like he was asked the same question about 4 or 5 times. And you actually got a little bit of aggressive Biden here, man. You got Sleepy Joe apparently took some Adderall or something, and he starts flailing and throwing some haymakers. So here he is, flaming reporters, and I don't know if you can categorize this as a double down or a triple down, but he doesn't like the line of questioning, and he appears to have some pretty strong feelings on the speech he gave the other day, where he said, my God, this guy can't remain in power, talking about Vladimir Putin. So let's take a look, and then I'll react.
Do you believe what you said, that Putin can't remain in power? Or do you now regret saying that because your government has been trying to walk that back? Did your words complicate matters?
Well, you asked 3 different questions. I'll answer them all. Number 1, I'm not walking anything back. The fact of the matter is I was expressing the moral outrage I felt toward the way Putin is dealing and the actions of this man. Just brutality. Half the children in Ukraine. I just come from being with those families. And so, but I want to make it clear, I wasn't then, nor am I now, articulating a policy change. I was expressing the moral outrage that I feel, and I make no apologies for it. My personal feelings. Secondly, you asked me about, what was the second part?
Complicate the diplomacy of this moment.
No, I don't think it does. The fact is that we're in a situation where what complicates the situation at the moment is the escalatory efforts of Putin to continue to engage in carnage, the kind of behavior that makes the whole world say, my God, what is this man doing? That's what complicates things a great deal. But I don't think it complicates it at all. Let me go to Steve Holland, Reuters.
Mr. President, thank you. When you say that you're not walking anything back, you do feel that Vladimir Putin should be removed from power? Is that what you're saying?
No, I was expressing just what I said. I was expressing the moral outrage I felt towards this man. I wasn't articulating a policy change. And I think that, if he continues on this course that he's on, he is going to become a pariah worldwide. And who knows what he becomes at home in terms of support. But,
are you concerned this remark might escalate the conflict?
No, I'm not. I'm not at all.
So saying he cannot remain in power does not mean regime change. What does it mean?
It means that I would hope it was expressing my outrage. He shouldn't remain in power. Just like, bad people shouldn't continue to do bad things. But it doesn't mean we have a fundamental policy to do anything to take Putin down in any way.
What made you add that? Because that wasn't in your prepared remarks, we were told. So what made you add that at the end, Mr. President?
Because I was talking to the Russian people. The last part of the speech was talking to the Russian people, telling them what we thought. And I was communicating this to not only the Russian people, but the whole world. This is just stating a simple fact that this kind of behavior is totally unacceptable.
Thank you very much.
I know you're going to ask a really nice question.
Well, it's an important question, I think. Are you worried that other leaders in the world are going to start to doubt that America is back if some of these big things that you say on the world stage keep getting walked back?
What's getting walked back?
It made it sound like, just in the last couple of days, it sounded like you told U.S. troops they were going to Ukraine. It sounded like you said it was possible the U.S. would use a chemical weapon, and it sounded like you were calling for regime change in Russia, and we know...
None of the 3 occurred.
None of the 3 occurred?
None of the 3.
Mr. President?
You interpret the language that way. I was talking to the troops. We were talking about helping train the troops that are the Ukrainian troops that are in Poland. That's what the context. I sat there with those guys for a couple hours. That's what we talked about.
So when you said you're going to see when you're there, you were not intending to
I was
see
referring to meeting with and talking with the Ukrainian troops that were in Poland.
And when you said a chemical weapon use by Russia would trigger a response in kind.
It will trigger a significant response.
What does that mean?
I'm not going to tell you. Why would I tell you? You got to be silly.
The world wants to know?
The world wants to know a lot of things. I'm not telling them what the response would be. Then Russia knows the response. All right, I'm going to take 2 more questions. 1, 2.
Mr. President, I still want to get back to your original words that he cannot remain in power. Can you help us understand, you have more foreign policy experience than any president who has ever held this office. Whether those are your personal feelings or your feelings as president, do you understand why people would believe you, as someone commanding one of the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, saying someone cannot remain in power is a statement of U.S. policy? And also, are you concerned about propaganda use of those remarks by the Russians?
No and no.
Tell me why. You have so much experience. You are the leader of this country.
Because it's ridiculous. Nobody believes we're going to take down. I was talking about taking down Putin. Nobody believes that. Number one. Number two, what have I been talking about since this all began? The only war that's worse than one intended is one that's unintended. The last thing I want to do is engage in a land war or a nuclear war with Russia. That's not part of it. I was expressing my outrage at the behavior of this man. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And it's more an aspiration than anything. He shouldn't be in power. People like this shouldn't be ruling countries, but they do. The fact they do, but doesn't mean I can't express my outrage about it.
Wow. So that was interesting to watch. I do find the media amazing because every single moment up to this point, there's been endless pressure on Biden from the right, where they're like, why aren't you being more hawkish? Why aren't you doing a no-fly zone? Why aren't you sending planes to Ukraine? Why aren't you giving Zelensky literally anything and everything that he wants? Which, of course, Zelensky, in his heart of hearts, would want the U.S. to be in the conflict and going after Russia because that would make it more likely that Ukraine would be able to stand. So every single question to this point has always been like from a neoconservative, hawkish perspective. But now, after Biden made that comment, all of a sudden everybody's pumping the brakes and like, whoa, are you talking about doing regime change in Russia? That's crazy. Now, that is crazy. That's insane. Like, to even breach that topic is preposterous because the guy has nuclear weapons. Again, this isn't like talking about Afghanistan and Iraq, which were bad enough. They were wars of aggression on the part of the U.S., but they didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Putin does. So he has an insurance policy to know that there is not going to be a direct conflict with the United States of America because the United States would have to have a suicide pact in order to do it. So it is insane. But when you listen to his explanation of his comments from the other day there, it's interesting. And I tend to believe, before I didn't know if it was written in the speech or not written in the speech. Apparently now the White House is saying it definitely was not written in the speech. So it was Biden sort of shooting from the hip and saying it. And I tend to believe that. I tend to believe he was babbling. Now, he definitely shouldn't have said it. But what do you think about the way he's handling it here? Because let's go through some of the specifics of it. He says, I'm not walking anything back, but it's not a change in policy. So in other words, he's saying, you guys are all interpreting this as now we have an official regime change policy in Russia, which, the implication there is like we're going to send in SEAL Team 6 or do a ground invasion of Russia, which is insane because, again, that could instantly lead to nuclear war. He's saying there's no change in policy, but I'm not walking anything back. This is one of those, like, I want to save face moments, but I can't keep it 100% real to save face. Because if you're keeping it 100% real, you could say, of course that was interpreted as our policy is to do regime change in Russia. So I am walking that back. But, it's the classic. He actually strikes me as very Trumpian in this press conference. The part of that I actually like is the aggression, but in terms of the substance of what he's saying, it's definitely lacking a little bit. He goes, or somebody asked, does it complicate diplomacy and does it escalate? And he says, no, it doesn't. Come on. Of course it does. Of course it does. And a question later on is this going to be used for propaganda purposes in Russia? The answer, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. They're already using it. There was a story the other day, Putin moved to some underground bunker. They probably upped the nuclear threat level even more than it was before. There's like a scale and they had moved it up 1 or 2 and now they're probably going to kick it up some more. So of course this is going to be used as a propaganda win. And of course Putin's going to spin it as like, look, the big bad West is threatening to come after us and totally destroy us. They said, you told us that troops were going to Ukraine. You said the U.S. will use chemical weapons. This is the Peter Doocy question that everybody's talking about. And Biden tries to slap that shit down real quick. Biden says, when asked to give specifics, like he said, we're going to have a significant response if they use chemical weapons. When asked for specifics, he again, this is classic Trumpian. He's like, why would I tell you? Why would I tell you what it's going to be? You got to be silly. Because if I tell you, then the Russians know. That reminds me of what Trump used to say about ISIS. Why would I broadcast the plan about how to take out ISIS? Because then ISIS is going to know, and then it won't work. So I have a very top secret, incredible, next level plan, and you guys are just going to have to wait and see. That is sort of like a Trumpian response. But in terms of, did he say that the U.S. is sending troops to Ukraine? What Biden clarifies there is the official U.S. policy, which is apparently our troops are training Ukrainian troops in Poland. Which, look, you could have an issue with that as a policy in and of itself. You could say, hey, man, that's like a pubes hair away from hot war with Russia, so maybe not a good idea to do it. But that is what's going on. It's not that we're deploying troops to Ukraine to directly fight Russia. Again, that would be sleepwalking into World War III. And at the end is probably the most interesting point, because Biden says, well, nobody believes I was talking about taking out Putin when I said this guy can't stay in power. That's what Biden says. Now, I understand how people can interpret it like that, because he says this guy's got to go. Now, on the flip side, though, again, I do feel like people are being a little bit dense in acting like he's announcing an official U.S. policy change that's above and beyond what we're already doing. Because, again, Vladimir Putin has nuclear weapons. So there is no, even if the U.S. was fully committed to that idea in every sense of the term, it's just not possible to do it with a guy who has nuclear weapons. That's the whole reason why a variety of different countries, including much smaller countries that are less powerful, why they want nuclear weapons. North Korea's GDP is like 57 cents in a Pop-Tart, and they're not being toppled. And they're not being toppled because they could take out Seoul, South Korea, because they have conventional weaponry, but also because, they have weapons of mass destruction. And so it's definitely an insurance policy against, the U.S. taking you out. And so everybody knows that about Russia, that they have the insurance policy. They have that extra layer of protection. They know the U.S. can't just waltz in there and take them out like all the other countries that we've done that to. So on the other hand, I do think people are being a little bit dense when they act like, no, this was definitely an official U.S. policy change towards Russia. Look, my guess is, based on everything I've seen, the way that the U.S. is approaching this and the way people are thinking about it is, of course we can't send in SEAL Team 6 and take out Vladimir Putin. Of course, you can't do a hot war with Russia. You could say we're escalating to that point, and the fog of war and miscommunication could get us there, which is abysmal, which is terrible. But in terms of at its highest aspiration, what is the U.S. doing? Well, we all know we're trying to implode the economy via sanctions, which I condemn because I don't want regular Russians to get hurt. A lot of Russians are against what Putin is doing. You can't do collective punishment. I don't agree with that. But between that and the sanctions of the oligarchs and the sanctions of Putin and the military and stuff like that, the real goal is, well, hopefully, cross your fingers, sit down and hope that there can be some movement behind the scenes, some pressure behind the scenes that forces Russia to withdraw from Ukraine, and or some sort of pressure that topples Putin internally. Now, that I think there's even legitimate criticism of that because, we've seen this before, whether it's in Iraq or whether it's in Libya with regime change, and whether it's what we attempted to do in Syria via al-Nusra, which is jihadists against Bashar al-Assad, the dictator. What comes next oftentimes can be worse. In fact, most of the time you get some sort of regime change, it's worse. So I think there's legitimate criticism on that front also. But you have to be honest about the nature of what the U.S. is trying to do. We're only committed to regime change insofar as maybe there's a tiny percentage chance that our sanctions will bring about some change in power. But, I think it's also equally likely that they're just trying to put enough pressure there to force Putin to withdraw because he can't even sustain the cost of an invasion. So I think people are being a little dense when they act like this is an official policy change. Because again, we know he has nuclear weapons. It's impossible to topple him like that. You just can't go in there. You can't do a hot war. You can't send in SEAL Team 6. This is obvious. So from the beginning, it was very likely that Biden went off script and was just shooting from the hip. I still don't think Biden should have said it. It was still an idiotic thing to say because it proves that the U.S. is not interested in peace first and foremost. If you're in the middle of peace negotiations, as Francis Macron says they are, well, then when you say your government is totally illegitimate and you shouldn't be in power anyway, well, then they're well within their rights to turn around and say, why would you even make a deal with me if I shouldn't even be in power? You're not a partner in peace. Your ultimate goal is getting rid of me. So why should I even talk to you? So it was a dumb thing to say. It was a stupid thing to say. It was counterproductive. It gives them a propaganda win. But in terms of, I can see why people would think he's announcing an official U.S. policy change. But deep down, everybody knows if you think about it for 3 seconds, it's not possible to just have that goal flat out, period, because that's World War III and homeboy has nukes. And so you can't explicitly, like, we're going to take him out. At its highest aspiration, it's like he said, it's like crossing your fingers and bad guys do bad things, so I hope the bad guy stops doing bad things and is squeezed out of power, something along those lines. But anyway, so the part of this that I like is that he's aggressive and he's slapping down the reporters. The part of this that I dislike is he is doing a lot of sophistry there. He is, when he says, I'm not walking anything back, but it's not a change in policy. It would be more honest to be like, yeah, I shouldn't have said that, but I'm not. We never changed the policy. That would be more honest. That'd be more forthright. But anyway, I'll leave it to you guys. What do you guys think about this back and forth? What do you guys think about his line of argument here? And to the media front, what I'll say is this. For the love of God, I would love to see the aggressive questioning more in this vein than in the vein of what they've done previously, where everything is from a neocon perspective. Everything is like, why can't you be more hawkish? Why can't you start World War III? Why can't you do a no-fly zone? Why can't you give Zelensky everything he wants? Why can't Ukraine get fighter jets from Poland that take off from Poland and attack Russia, which, again, is World War III? I would much rather see this kind of an aggressive media. A media that's like, hey, let's be clear here. You don't want to say you're for regime change, right? Because at least that's from a more de-escalatory perspective. So anyway, there you have it. You guys let me know what you think. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.